An incredible quartet of friends that excited the whole of St. Petersburg. A daring trick that helped get the highest award. And treason that put an end of friendship. The Taras Shevchenko National Museum. It took almost half a century to build a building that would charm visitors with its beauty and grandeur. It took over 150 years to assemble a collection that is included in the Golden Fund of Ukrainian culture. Priceless artifacts belonging to the artistic heritage of Shevchenko overturn traditional ideas about the great poet that hide big secrets and reflect the little-known life of the artist. His first self-portrait is one such artifact. Oil painting on canvas, 43 by 35 centimeters. In terms of artistic characteristics, it was done in Brylov style. The contrast of light and shadow, harmonious combination of colors. Shevchenko painted his first self-portrait in this manner. One gets an impression of highness and a certain romance from this art. It is also called the most romantic of all romantic self-portraits. But the conditions of its creation are far from being as romantic as they seem when you look at the portrait. May 7, 1838, became Taras Shevchenko's second birthday. Philanthropists handed him a release certificate. The joy of the former serf had no bounds. Taras Shevchenko rapidly entered the apartment of his friend Ivan Soshenko through the window while screaming freedom. On May 20th, his release was confirmed by the Civic Chamber. The very next day, he became a student of Brylov's historical painting class. Shevchenko was the favorite student of Karl Brylov, the Great Karl, as his contemporaries called him. Shevchenko even spent some time living in Brylov's studio. The diary that he wrote many years later in exile contained memories of Brylov's wealthy studio decorated with red curtains, as well as Shevchenko's delight at the works of Brylov. The Red Room, the teacher's rich library. These are the things that impressed Taras and remained in his memory forever. But besides the amazing room and wise books, Shevchenko was also struck down by a strange disease. The aforementioned Soshenko recalled that after Shevchenko had got his freedom, he began studying at the academy. Naturally, he had a certain amount of money. First, he studied at the expense of the Society for the Encouragement of Artists as a pensioner of society. He also painted portraits to order. All of St. Petersburg high society paid good money for his sessions. An elderly, joyless old man in a fur hat and jacket who just writes and suffers and writes. That's how Ukrainians remember Shevchenko from school textbooks. But the real Taras has nothing to do with the emaciated and boring man that the Soviet government made him and passed down to the Ukrainian inheritance. This is emphasized by his first oil self-portrait, which he would later paint, although the circumstances of its creation would not be the best.
Його надзвичайно любили люди.
We must understand that Shevchenko is not just when I die, lay me to rest.
Академічний, да?
The academic one that we're forced to study in school, whom we don't even understand. Shevchenko was the soul of the party. Shevchenko was loved by everyone, by aristocrats too. He didn't suffer from social anxiety. As Shevchenko wrote, the secular demon possesses Taras. He got acquaintanced with the best homes of St. Petersburg through Brylov at the time. He visited all these soirees and spent money. He had a raccoon fur coat. He could afford carriages and expensive theater tickets. So we can say that Shevchenko became a socialite, a sort of St. Petersburg dandy at that time.
Світським левом, певним петербурзьким денді.
Shevchenko, who had dreamt of studying painting since childhood, basked in glory and spent his time in high society circles. Shevchenko, who made a significant contribution to the fulfillment of Taras's dream, worked hard and huddled in a small, dilapidated apartment. He used to chide his frivolous friend at the first opportunity. Shevchenko was an intelligent and modest man. He reproached Taras for that a lot.
Тарасові за це дуже дорікав. Але Шевченко дорікав Шевченкові навіть за те, що той писав вірші.
Shevchenko reprimanded Shevchenko even for writing poetry instead of painting. That is, he was very serious about his profession and wanted Taras to be an equally diligent student and worker of art. Between the poor run-down walls, a wooden easel, various brushes and paints, the poetic tragedy of the Ukrainian nation was being born. Hey Soha, what do you think of this? Shevchenko tested his Katerina painting on his friend. It's not known whether it was Taras's secular life or his sudden passion for poetry that irritated Ivan Shevchenko. But soon, simple irritation turned into something greater. A cold line ran through their close, friendly relations. As often happens, the reason for that was a woman. The niece of the owner of the apartment also lived there. As Shevchenko wrote about her, a very pretty German girl, Maria Yevropios. She was an orphan brought up by her aunt, who also rented out her apartment to Shevchenko and Shevchenko. Shevchenko did right, but it seemed as if he didn't notice the young nymph in everyday life. She started flirting with him from the first days of Shevchenko's stay in their apartment. She was very open about her flirting. Ivan Shevchenko, who was 32 at the time, remained indifferent to all her tricks, although it was only his outward appearance that seemed like that. Shevchenko fell in love with that girl and even considered marrying her. However, that remained a secret to her and everyone else. Suddenly, a certain bright face from St. Petersburg appeared under the roof of the grey apartment, which also meant in the line of sight of Maria. It only took a few days of the favorite of women and soul of the party to win over the heart of the pretty German girl. Taras spent cold winter days in Maria's hot embraces. Ivan Shevchenko was unaware of that friendship. But everything changed on February 17, 1839. Cancelled classes forced Shevchenko to return home early. What he saw on that day killed his faith in women for the rest of his life and, for a while, in male friendship. Yevropios responded to the sudden appearance of Shevchenko calmly. She got up, got dressed, and left with a proud expression. Shevchenko, however, could not boast of such self-control. It was only then that he realized that he'd stolen the love of his friend. There was an argument between them. Shevchenko was forced to leave that apartment and go to live in another place. But that did not help Shevchenko much, because Maria started visiting Taras Shevchenko at the apartment where he lived. Volodymyr Sorotenko wrote in his book, Taras Shevchenko from the Stories of My Ancestors. The housing problem put an end to the relationship between Taras and Maria. There was enough place in the artist's new apartment to make love, but not to live together. Subsequently, Shevchenko moved to the apartment of his friend and part-time student of Karl Brylov, Grigory Mikhailov, even though he actually didn't move anywhere, since he continued staying in Brylov's apartment night and day. But he did occasionally wander outside, and that is when events took place that completely break the deeply rooted myth of the gloomy, suffering Shevchenko. Once two young artists, one of whom was Taras himself and the other was also a student of the Academy of Arts, Fedor Ponomarov, came to their friend Petro Petrovsky, who had been working on his latest painting at the time. The painting, which was supposed to depict an angel, needed wings, and they decided that goose wings would come down to paint angel wings. The problem was that none of them had the money to buy a goose. And then Taras's empty stomach gave him a brilliant idea. Shevchenko and his friends stole a goose from the Academy's supervisor, cooked it in a samovar, and ate it. The stomachs of three hungry artists were filled with delicious meat, and Petrovsky got an excellent model for an angel. Moreover, that painting also received an award from the Academy, and its creator went on a business trip abroad. Shevchenko liked joking that the wings of a goose got the author of the painting a trip abroad. The sometimes hungry but no less carefree life of Taras Shevchenko was invaded by a terrible disease. In late November, first Brylov and then his favorite student Taras fell ill with typhoid fever. The great Karl ordered to take his prodigy to the apartment of Fyodor Ponomarov so that both doctors and colleagues could look after him regularly. As Ponomarov said, that disease ate up all their money. Taras eventually managed to defeat the disease. He crowned his victory with two wonderful works, one of which was his first all-self-portrait. The first self-portrait of Taras Shevchenko appears in January to February 1840. Shevchenko would soon turn 26. The young man had already lived a fairly interesting life. It included being freed from serfdom, which occurred in 1838, and 2 years of quite successful study at the St. Petersburg Academy of Arts in Karl Brylov's class. The watercolor works of the young artist were approved by both the academic exhibition and the press, despite the fact that Taras Shevchenko only started mastering oil paints shortly before the sickness. The first attempt was so successful. It was the year when Shevchenko had already submitted the manuscript of his first collection of poems, called Kobzar. The censorship committee was reviewing the case for publishing Kobzar. It can be said that we're looking at a young creator, artist and poet in this self-portrait. Lightly glazed and skillfully combined with layering of paints, with the contrast built on blue-green tones with the addition of red and the romantic coloring of the image, the influence of Karl Brylov is clearly traced. This self-portrait belonged to the magazine Russian Antiquity for some time, because it was used to make an engraving. Then it ended up in a private collection. It was part of the collection of one Russian merchant and philanthropist. In Soviet times, it became part of Shevchenko's gallery of paintings, which marked the start of the history of the collection, which is now being exhibited in our museum. 20 years on, and Shevchenko would change his romantic image, painting style, and the example to follow. But his works would remain of equally high quality and dramatic fate, almost more dramatic than that of the author himself.